Welcome, welcome. High fives to all my subscribers and a subtle, yet directed nod to anyone bored enough to watch my trash who is yet to subscribe. In regards to my trash, I've decided to step it up a bit. As my regular listeners will know, I've been trying to get some chats going on. After too many whiskeys, having just had my Twitter cherry popped, I decided to make some vague waving movements over a Ritz. I tilted back my head and called out to our levitating linguini lord for a messenger. I don't need to tell you that I was immediately rewarded. Our sticky starch savior sent me an actual professor who does not yet know how crazy I am to have a bit of a chat. It is with great pleasure, excitement, and anticipation to learn and grow, basically to be shown completely wrong, that I introduce Professor Flynn. In a style that might be better suited to my background. In this corner, hailing from places unknown with a record of idiocy, the mass terror, the inarticulate imbecile, the one, the only, Afidemist. And in the other corner, the champ, the professional prof, the provider of proofs, the arbiter of arguments, the origin of all legends ever told, Professor Flynn! Flynn. Roll the damn intro. Let's get this on. We were talking about groups and tribalism, and I kind of brought up the police force. Do you think that perhaps some form of group cohesion, like a football team or something like that, might be going on in the police force due to the way it's set up? And certainly that perhaps may cause, certainly it may, maybe that would cause some of the problems that we're seeing. Perhaps not 100%, perhaps not 20%, maybe it adds to it.
Right. So I have to say, by the way, I hope that people watching either now or later will agree that you ask fantastic questions.
Oh, well, thank you. I steal them from... No, questions.
I don't. I don't always answer them, because you asked this before and I went on somewhere else. So I'll say this. I'll be a good skeptic and say, I don't know if, problems with police have to do with group cohesion, blah, blah, blah. But another question, related question, I'm going to bring these together.
Sure.
A related question that you asked me that I didn't answer was, what's good about theism, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that's good about it is that it encourages community.
Nice.
Right? And we are social creatures. We've evolved to be that way. Adam was not, if you believe in the whole Adam thing, Adam was not created with an ethos that relied upon community, because there wasn't one, right? There's just him, right?
Fair enough.
We weren't created to be seekers of community, but we have evolved that way for all the reasons that, people who know more about evolutionary biology and sociology than I do will tell you. So here's the thing. And football teams are a great example. I have played competitive sports. Individual sports I'm okay with, but I like being on a team.
I competitively brought the athletes water competitively.
Right. Good for you. Someone has to do it. I like being on a team, and I used to be in my school band and choir, and I consider teaching to be largely about creating a community, right? That we are what Stanley Fish, the literary theorist, used to call an interpretive community. So here's the thing. That's a great thing about theism, and that's a great thing about police departments and police forces.
Mm-hmm.
They need that cohesion, right?
Absolutely,
they need
it's
to be
important.
able to rely on one another.
Soldiers in a war.
To act out. Soldiers in a war, same thing. Here's the problem. Well, there are two. First problem is that obviously not every community that is formed is a good community in objective ways, right? Oh, look, it's a death cult. Well, that may not the best, the Manson family.
It's okay to offend Jim Jones and Charles Manson. That's okay. We can offend them.
Right. It was called the Manson family and not the Manson people, because there was group cohesion.
Yeah.
So problem one, not all communities are good. Problem two, which is related to all things I've said about Christianity, but now I'll say it about not all but some police forces, and we've seen it in the shooting in Uvalde, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a cohesion that's built around solid values, mm-hmm. and you believe in those values and you behave according to those values. But there's something about some officers, and I would say, I think, about some police forces that also, or alternatively, cohere around the idea of the thin blue line and covering their asses, right? So that the group identity is, and this is true in Uvalde, those cops, their group identity was, we have to protect ourselves and our reputation. Mm-hmm. They had a SWAT, that police force had a fucking SWAT team. That police force had training on how to do breaches. Mm-hmm. That training included, look, if you're the solo officer, and there wasn't just a solo officer, but if you're the solo officer, you can't, in that situation, you can't wait for your brothers and sisters to show up.
A lot of the mums didn't, running in to saving their own children. I think I heard
the mothers
of a father
did,
doing
right?
It.
Because the mothers were committed to a community whose values were about more than just self-preservation. The mother who ran in, the cops were literally tasing parents who wanted to go in and try to rescue their kids. One woman, I hope people have seen the news, one woman actually got around the police, jumped the fence, ran in, grabbed her kids, ran out. Mm-hmm. With no gun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She just had a commitment to her community, her family.
Yeah.
The cops, in this instance at least, and we saw the same thing with the George Floyd thing. We see it, we've seen it so many times. I'm old enough to think back to Rodney King and the way that cops mm-hmm. covered for each other. When when the noble aims of your community and the basis of its cohesion is corrupted to become only about one's self-preservation, that ain't a good community anymore.
I wonder if it doesn't, the police force, and like politics, certainly not everybody, maybe not even the majority, but I wonder if it doesn't attract the wrong sort of people. So I'm obviously a terribly mean, angry bully who throws things. If I was like that, perhaps I'd like to
be a cop.
Do that for my life. If I was the sort of person that always wanted to tell other people what to do, wanted to have a lot of power, maybe I should go into politics. Perhaps these systems are set up in negative ways. Certainly comment on that if you like. You've mentioned morality and values several times. How do we come to morality in your mind?
Okay.
So
Can you remind me of the morality question after I say what I'm about to say about police?
I'll see what I can do, but I don't have much of a memory.
It is certainly true this will be quick, I hope. It's certainly true from what I know about, I have a very good friend who is a police officer in the city I live in, mm-hmm. and she she tells me about like how officers often, I wouldn't say often, they sometimes ignore their training. And she has explained to me that, at least for her police force, and I've heard this about other police forces across North America, you will not be trained and hired to be a cop if you test too smart.
Oh. Okay.
And the explanation that she tells me, the explanation isn't, oh, we want stupid people who just follow orders. It has more to do with as she says it, has more to do with the concern that smart people who get into police work will leave it fairly quickly when they realize this is not a good...
And then they lose money in training and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So the morality question, where do we get our morality and values? That was basically it.
Not necessarily where if you would like to, but we mentioned values in different circumstances. So what I generally see when I look around, perhaps incorrectly, is different people get their morality from different places. My idea is, well, it's certainly not mine, but the idea that I adhere to is more of, no, we can come to at least some version of morality, and I grabbed this from Sam Harris. And I want to get back to him a little bit later, but where should we get our morality from? If not the Bible, not the Quran, if morality is not subjective, which you may think it is.
Okay. So, of course, morality is subjective. We don't have time to get into that. It is.
So, I'm sorry, can I ask a question about that then?
Yeah.
So when we say when I say morality is subjective, what I mean is different people believe different things. That is absolutely fact. The question might be...
I believe, I'll refine that, at least from my point of view.
Please.
It isn't just different people believing different things. It is a person having different beliefs about the same thing in different contexts. Is it wrong to steal? I'm going to say yes. Is it wrong to steal a loaf of bread when my child is starving and is going to die? There are, I don't want to get Kantian, categorical imperative, all that shit, but I would say no. Killing seems to me to be bad.
So what you're saying is there's nuance.
Killing. Look, the kid who shot up that classroom and murdered 19 children and 2 teachers, his killing was wrong. But the killing of him,
if morality is subjective, I could say, and I do not feel this way.
Right,
I could say that no,
he wasn't wrong.
I could say that if morality is subjective, but the problem there is, aren't I wrong when I say that? I would maintain that I am wrong.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
In saying that
there are moral standards, and where do we derive those from? And I would say that our ultimate duties are to truth, because we don't get anywhere if we're not being truthful.
I'm sorry, we don't get anywhere from...
We don't get, if we're not being truthful, we don't get anywhere as a society. We don't have cohesion because we can't trust one another.
Gotcha. Yep.
You can do the math on that. But I think there are certain principles that we can say are, pretty close to objective standards. I would say not even pursuing truth, but being truthful.
Trying.
That's like trying. Yeah, that's fair. Trying. That's, I think, objectively moral, or an objective moral standard of sorts. Of course, you can have a mental illness in which you don't know what the truth is. There are caveats, of course.
Absolutely.
But certainly we prioritize behaviors. I'll just say behaviors. I won't say thoughts and behaviors. We prioritize behaviors by, often instinctively, which I'm going to get to, by testing them against those moral standards.
Okay.
And saying, can this standard be elasticized a bit? And the example that I am going to get to the categorical imperative now, Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant has, so many people have said this is not original to me at all. One of Kant's categorical imperatives. Categorical imperative means You have to do it.
Something
where
you
morality
can't
resides.
do. Yes.
You're right. You can't disobey the categorical imperative. And one of the categorical imperatives is kind of what I just said, being honest. But the question gets asked, what happens when, I hate to bring up Nazis, but I had to do it. It's
Bring
just
'em.
a good example.
Bring them.
What happens when you're living in Germany in 1942 or 43 and you're hiding your Jewish neighbors in your attic, and the SS comes to your door and says, "Are you hiding your Jewish neighbors in your attic?"
Do you lie or not is the question.
The categorical imperative is you have to tell the truth.
Yes, if it's an imperative.
But that's obviously a faulty imperative because it is outweighed by the responsibility to care for the welfare of others. And I was going to say a few minutes ago when you asked the question about morals, how do you define moral? And one of the ways that Sam Harris defines it is as acting out of consideration for the what's the word he uses?
He generally uses well-being.
The well-being. That's it. That's exactly it. He says acting out of concern for the well-being of others. Now, let's call that a categorical imperative.
Okay.
And let's call the don't lie a categorical imperative. Now you have two categorical imperatives that can be in conflict in some instances.
Absolutely. So
then you have to
calculus.
make a decision. Then you have to make a decision, and this is what separates stupid people from smart people. They can do the math. They can, to go back to my worn-out analogy, they can use the can opener of their rational thought to discern that one thing is better than the other without saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which, by the way, the golden rule, which is flawed anyhow. You shouldn't do unto others as you want them to do unto you. You should do unto others as they would want to be done unto.
Yes, that is a better phrasing.
If I like being kicked in the balls and I shouldn't assume that you enjoy that.
You're talking to the right guy.
So, there was one other thing I was going to say. Morality, maybe it's not even important. Morality, I acted instinctively because I have evolved. It is 100% instinct that I acted upon. I didn't think about it. I didn't have to do the moral calculus of, what would Jesus do? Or I didn't have to think. I did think enough about the guy in the wheelchair to wonder, I shouldn't just push the guy. I need to ask him if it's okay if I do.
So wait a minute.
But I didn't have to refer to ancient texts. I didn't have to do any of that thinking. We have evolved to do well to one another.
If that's not an example of you being a good person, are there examples of being a good person? What would they look like?
Those are probably good. Those are probably examples of being a good person.
Okay.
So those are things that I felt obliged to do, right? So in that sense, short answer, we have evolved with certain moral instincts. We can override them or ignore them or follow them according in part to our nature. If you're cognitively compromised, maybe you can't, that happens. But we have these things instinctively, but it's what we learn, or it's also what we learn, not just what our teachers, parents tell us, not what the Bible says, but what we observe when we act and move in the world. We can learn when to act upon those moral standards, there's no categorical imperative to buy someone their donuts, right?
Certainly not.
There's no categorical imperative to be nice to people.
No, I don't think so.
That's a personal imperative, not a categorical imperative. But we learn, it's a combination of instinct and evolution, and I'm sure other people smarter than I or more knowledgeable in this field than I, they would say that, hey, look, if you're in a bad enough state that you need to have your book and your God tell you how to behave and how to treat other people well, rather than being able to do it yourself, by all means, fucking memorize your Bible and go to church 24/7.
Because we're scared of what's going to happen if you don't.
But here's the thing. This gets back to your earlier question about communities and cohesion and police forces and tribalism. These things are all related. This is, I think we're nearing the end, and this is bringing a lot of those things together.
Absolutely.
Right? That tribalism can be used to good and bad effects as well, right? At some point, because there is such a thing as looking out for your family, looking out for your clan.
Yes.
Now, are there ways to act upon tribalism that are not good? Of course. Are there ways to act upon that are good? Of course. Mom running in and grabbing her kids. What separates us from the moral equivalent of the baby with the can opener who starves to death, which I've used as kind of an example of stupidity. What separates us from them, and I am including Christian evangelical apologists in the them here, separates us from the baby with the can opener, is that we actually not only know how to use a can opener, but we think about using it.
Whereas they're not. The baby has no concept of the can opener.
And you didn't raise this question, but it was implicit in a lot of what you said around this. Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah. That's a
what are you going to do? And Sam Harris, this has become the Sam Harris tribute show, but Sam Harris says this very eloquently. How do you reason with the person who is incapable of or unwilling to reason?
Well, I think the problem is inherent in the question. It's not that they're incapable of, it's that they haven't learned how. So, for example, I have not learned how to skydive.
Right.
You know, it's like, he can never skydive. How could you possibly get him to sky? Well, you'd have to teach him. Actually, that still wouldn't work, so it's a terrible example because I still wouldn't be skydiving. But let's pivot on that Sam Harris for the very last
Can I just
question.
add one very quick thing to that? It's very, very quick.
You got it.
I would maybe it's semantics here, but I would just slightly refine what you said about, they haven't learned how to do it, maybe?
Yes.
They haven't learned how to use their can opener, parachute, whatever? Sure. But I think that in many instances, and particularly ones involving dogmatic tribalism or tribal dogmatism, it isn't just not learning how to do it, it's learning not to do it.
Well, I think you hit it on the first place with Dunning-Kruger. So I think what happens is, in these tribes, name any one you want. It really doesn't matter. Religious, political, it really does not matter. What's happening is people, in my opinion, people have been taught this is the way to think about this.
This is the way.
Instead of being taught this is the way to think. So if I could make maybe a better analogy, I don't know anything about painting, so it's probably not going to be a better analogy. But if I were to say something like, I need you to paint this in a particular style from the Renaissance or something like that.
Whatever.
Impressionist, sure. If someone were to ask me to do that, I would have no concept. Even if they showed me that style, like another painting of that style, I still don't know what I'm doing. The difference here is that people think they can paint. That's the problem. I think I can paint. So let me leave the analogy because I'm losing the metaphor here, but we think throughout our entire lives. We make choices throughout our entire lives. We decide what we believe and don't believe. The issue is, how many of us are aware that's a subject? Like math. This is a subject. There is a way to do it. This is the basis of all subjects. And
of course,
thinking that I can paint without having studied painting or paintings or painters is a problem. But I wanted to stick with Sam Harris.
I have to add one.
Please do. Go for it.
Don't quick. I can't remember exactly how you
poorly.
What your
poorly is the way I worded it.
That point was, but you said someone asking you to paint in a certain style.
Sure.
Was it something that you said?
Yeah.
When you said that, I agree, but I want to refine it a bit. It isn't just being asked to paint like an impressionist or an expressionist, whatever. It's being told what to paint. right? So you're not thinking about how do I paint like Monet. You are just on autopilot, like the dog told to stay off the couch. You are looking at a Monet painting and just copying it without understanding that it's an impressionist work, because you're not thinking about what you're doing it. You're just doing what you've been told.
I think maybe you've misunderstood my analogy. Perhaps I misworded it. I'm saying that people need to study painting to be good painters. People need to study medicine to be good doctors.
Yeah.
People need to study math to be mathematicians, and so on, and so on, and so on. The difference here is that we don't do this in the area of critical thinking. I don't need to study critical thinking to be a critical thinker. Well, Tiger, use that in any other area of life. So maybe the painting example was bad in terms of a Renaissance example. What I mean is a person has never studied the Renaissance style paintings, has never studied any style of paintings, and thinks they're a good painter. That's the analogy that I'm trying to draw. Yeah, people have studied philosophy, but also the thing with a lot of people who study philosophy, myself included, is that we don't learn a lot of philosophy. Now, bear with me for a second.
I'm an advocate, by the way, for teaching critical thinking throughout, if not elementary school, then middle school and high school.
I'm elementary school. My point was going to be that in philosophy classes, largely, not only, we read about philosophers. But this is a little strange.
But we're not taught how to philosophize. Yeah.
But we're not taught philosophy. Like, yeah, when I studied math, I learned about Pythagoras as well. But I mean, I didn't learn a lot about him. Guy was a bit crazy and probably started a cult. Like C squared equals A squared plus B squared. When you study
physics, it isn't just all about the biography of Sir Isaac Newton.
Yes.
You learn how to employ the method.
Yes.
Right? And we do not learn how to employ that method. Although I would say this. When it comes to philosophy, I'm speaking with very little knowledge.
Okay.
But I think I'm a pretty good critical thinker.
I think we all do.
Unlike, the physics calculations that, allow, a rocket or a satellite to orbit the Earth or whatever. Those physics methodologies, calculations, all those things, you have to learn those. We don't intuit the coefficiency of friction given various surfaces, right? Although we can say,
looks like a 0.089 to me.
This ice is likely to be more slippery than that Velcro.
Sure. I
would say that when it comes to critical thinking, stepping back from a purely philosophical point of view, it's important to remember that the roots, the foundations, the bases of critical thinking are largely founded. I mean, in a really simple foundational way, they are largely founded on our intuitions and our observation of certain behaviors in certain contexts in a way that doesn't require schooling, right? I don't need to be a trauma surgeon to have watched that 2-year-old kid fall down the stairs and see that his arm is bent at a horribly bad angle at the wrong place, and there's blood. I know there's something wrong without being an EMT.
Absolutely, right? But there is an important distinction.
And critical thinking is like that, but I agree, we have to teach critical thinking.
So I think you're right, but I think there's an important distinction there. Yes, I think in a lot of ways you can intuit critical thinking. Let's go back to the appeal to ignorance fallacy. I think if people were to sit down and think about it, I don't know what else it could be, therefore it's this. I think a lot of people would understand that, yes, that's fallacious. The issue would be how many people sit down and think about it. So yeah, the point that I think needs to be added here though is testing, right? Like, just because I can intuit something and think, oh, okay, that sounds intelligent to me, doesn't necessarily make it so. And, peer review and so on and such forth, this is where all this stuff comes from. I share my ideas, you tell me why they're dumb. I change my ideas, you tell me why they're dumb. I change them again, and I learn.
Here's a book that I often use in my first year classes, which this isn't a plug, but it's a useful book. The problem is that
Fallacious reasoning?
Attacking
Faulty reasoning.
Faulty Reasoning
Uh-huh.
by, I can't see the name on the back cover.
IP
The only problem is, this isn't a plug. It's incredibly expensive. This copy, which is, it's 228 pages, softback.
228 pages of an expensive book, or like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Well, yeah, exactly. And even like I went on Amazon the other day because I'd recommended the book to someone, and like two, stale dated editions from 2 or 3 editions of the book ago are going for like $200, $300. So I don't recommend the book, but I recommend finding some resource if you can't take a university class, finding some reliable resource that isn't me and you talking on YouTube to learn about these things. It's so important. It's so important to overcoming many of the obstacles that we face as a society.
You're getting the fireworks again, whether you can hear them or not. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. We were supposed to do this for an hour. It's been...
You had a Sam Harris point. Can you ask it quickly? Or
I can. I don't know if it's a quick question or a quick answer, but the question was going to be, you had mentioned at the beginning, and I'm surprised I remember anything ever, really. But anyway, you had mentioned at the beginning that Sam Harris kind of went a little bit loopy. Prior to you mentioning that, I was going to bring up I had planned to bring up the word spirituality and ask you about it in specifically in terms of, what you think about it, about atheism, so on and such forth. And then when you brought up the Sam Harris going a little bit weird, I was going to ask if that was it. So I guess, like always, pick your question and answer it.
No, I think Sam Harris and I would agree that, maybe for different reasons, I can't recall his reasons, but he and I would agree that spirituality is an incredibly murky term. Doesn't have a lot of meaning.
I can agree to that.
But I thought that long before I ever, heard about Sam Harris. It just, it is, I'd almost, in a way, this is going to be kind of cold and cynical, but I'd almost compare it to agnosticism in a way, as the thing that people
I'm sorry,
who probably are atheists say when they can't quite bring themselves to say they're an atheist.
I'm sorry, can you define agnosticism for me? You made my head skip a beat there.
So again, I'm not giving you the Cambridge encyclopedia.
Just the way you use the word.
I'm going to say, just as atheism is the lack of belief in gods and God systems and in God beliefs, agnosticism is the absence of knowledge of whether it's true.
I agree completely. Now
so
can
you
you
be a Gnostic atheist or an agnostic atheist, right?
I
Some
completely
people will claim, I know there isn't a God, I'm a Gnostic atheist.
Yeah.
Most atheists, I think, would say, I don't know.
I call myself an agnostic atheist. But now can you go back to the comparison you made between spirituality and agnosticism? That's where you lost me. So I wanted to make sure we were defining terms similarly. We are.
So both of those terms can be defined. But I'm, how can I say this? When I invoked spirituality and agnosticism together and compared them, I wasn't talking about their prescriptive meaning. Look in the dictionary, what does it mean? I was talking about their descriptive meaning. That is how people speak about their own beliefs. And the comparison I was making, the way I think that they're similar, is that I think both of them are fuzzy or weak statements.
What is fuzzy
position.
or weak about saying I don't know?
No, sorry. Let me clarify.
Okay.
There's nothing weak about saying I don't know. But my point was more that just as many people will claim not to be religious but to be spiritual, many people, I shouldn't say many, in my experience, some decent number of people who are probably actually atheists are somewhat, and it's you can understand why, they are reluctant to call themselves atheists. So they'll call themselves agnostic instead. So what I'm saying is that in that case, those people, and I don't think it's intentional, I think those people are not using the word
I agree with that.
agnostic.
If you say, do you believe in God, and someone says, I'm agnostic, that is a failure of understanding the question.
It doesn't, yeah.
It doesn't answer the question. But, you know, words are descriptive and not prescriptive. So I completely agree with you about spirituality. I think, and I think this is a topic probably for a video that I'll make at some stage. It seems to me, from the little that I know about these spiritual leaders, that I think if I listen very, very charitably, I actually agree with kind of what I think they might be saying. The biggest problem I have with a lot of what they're saying is what they're saying. You know, like, if you wake up and grow your consciousness, shut up. What are you talking about? I would like to be awake and to become more aware. What is this? What does it exactly mean? Speak in terms of a subject, please, like psychology or philosophy, right, or make up another subject and show me why I should follow it. It sounds wooey to me. But maybe it's just because I haven't listened to the right woo master.
One of the ways that this is often, I think, I agree with everything, and now I'm just going to sort of take what you said and feed it right back in kind of from the opposite direction.
Sure.
It's everything that you said, yes, I agree. But you can also feed it back the other way and say that people attribute spirituality to processes in a very willy-nilly way. For instance, meditation.
Yep.
I've seen the studies.
Lots of benefits of meditation.
Things that, what's that?
Lots of benefits of meditation.
Tons and tons and tons. But has nothing to do with whatever spirituality is. And my minor, I should have said this at the beginning. Not only was I raised hardcore Catholic, my minor for my bachelor's degree was in religious studies. Mm-hmm. So I say to theists I talk to, look, I know this stuff not just from the, sitting in church point of view, but I also know it from a scholarly perspective as well. Mm-hmm. Am I perfect and do I have complete knowledge in both? No, of course.
Who is?
But one of the courses I took, which I really enjoyed, was as part of my minor, was called Psychology of Religion. Mm-hmm. And we read the studies of, I'm going to forget now, I think it's beta, it could be alpha waves, I can't remember which, but studies of prayer. They would study people, I don't know, stick them in an MRI, I don't know how they measured it, but they could see that people in a meditative state could achieve the same wave pattern, okay, as people who engaged in deep prayer. Mm-hmm. Now, prayer and meditation are not the same thing. There are objective reasons to meditate. There are. It's very good for you to be. I used to do cognitive-based meditation, CBMT. Mm-hmm. I had to stop because I just would fall asleep all the time.
I actually pronounce it differently, but I do it all the time as well. Meditate.
CBT, yeah. Now, meditation and prayer, I would say, are different. But how can I say this? They can lead you to the same state. What I would consider to be a mistake, and a spiritual or religious person would not, is I can meditate and explain its benefits with reference to my own brain state. Mm-hmm. People who are spiritual or religious will discuss those or frame the same idea outside but of them, with reference not just to their brain state, but to some larger power. Yes. And which I think is, as a skeptic, I think hasn't been proven. Prove it.
I completely agree with you. Literally down to the word, hasn't yet been shown correct.
Yeah,
I feel
I'll believe
similarly about my atheism towards spirituality. If you want me to believe in whatever it is that you're claiming, it doesn't matter what it is, you need to show me good reasons to believe in those things. That's what being a skeptic means to me. So, yeah.
It's the Aaron Roth thing. Very quickly, Aaron Roth says this.
Aaron, I
used to say
believe,
this
but
often.
yeah.
If you can't show it, you don't know it.